There are several benefits of buying a plant on clearance, including cost savings, experimenting with new species or varieties of plants that you may not have considered before, and even giving a plant a second chance at life and rescuing it from potential disposal or waste. Overall, buying a plant on clearance can be a smart and rewarding choice for both you and your wallet and the environment. And it can lead to discovering a new favorite plant species or helping a struggling plant to thrive. Now, if you've recently bought a houseplant from the clearance section of your local plant store or garden center and it's not looking too healthy, don't worry. There are things you can do to save it. So in this episode of my Houseplant Care 101 series, sponsored by our friends at rePotme, I'm going to share some tips on choosing a plant from the clearance section and how to care for it when you bring it home. This Houseplant Care 101 series is sponsored by rePotme.com. With rePotme, you can have all of your houseplant supplies delivered right to your door. They are a one-stop shop for all of your houseplant, orchid, or succulent needs. They have custom handmade houseplant soils ranging from tropical houseplants, cactus and succulents, pothos, snake plants, and more. I cannot live without their clear slotted orchid pots. They have amazing houseplant fertilizers and so much more. I've included their link in my description below, and you can get 10% off any soil with my code Ashley. First step is to check the leaves. Now, a lot of the plants on clearance will have yellowing leaves, but try to find a plant that at least has some new growth or some green leaves. Try to avoid a plant with all brown leaves, no leaves, or leaves that are completely wilted. Now, some varieties, as we all know, like peace lilies and photonias, can be somewhat dramatic when they're thirsty and have very floppy leaves. But you want to make sure there's at least some structure to the leaf if it's very wilted. Also, keep an eye out for pests. Personally, if I see a plant that has pests, no matter how good of a deal it is, I won't bring it home. It's just not worth the risk of spreading those pests to my other plants. Also check the stem and branches. They should be firm and sturdy, not soft or mushy. Try to choose a plant that has as healthy roots as possible. If they are brown and mushy, that plant has root rot. So you may be able to rehab the plant back to health as long as it has a lot of healthy roots as well as some mushy roots. If it has 100% mushy roots or no roots at all, I'd recommend avoiding it unless you are a super plant pro. There were a lot of great options at the store, but I ended up purchasing this huge ponytail palm for 50% off at a big box shop on clearance. It's looking a little rough, but it should be fine once I give it some TLC. So you've brought your plant home, now what? The first thing to do is assess if anything's wrong with your plant. Look for signs of disease or pest infestation, such as brown spots, yellowing, or webbing. Also check if the soil is dry or waterlogged. That way you'll know what next steps to take. This beautiful ponytail palm has so many dead leaves, I cannot wait to trim them off. And did you know that dead leaves can actually provide a breeding ground for pests and diseases, which can spread to the rest of the plant, so removing them promptly can help prevent the spread of disease and keep your plant healthy. Removing those dead leaves can also encourage your plant to redirect its energy towards new growth and development instead of wasting resources on dead or damaged leaves. Not to mention, it just looks so much better. So once you've removed all of those ugly dead leaves, your plant should already be looking way better. Next up is root care, and if your plant is waterlogged or if the soil seems to be in poor condition, it might be time to repot your plant. If you see roots sticking out everywhere, that's a good indication it's time. Now, something is clearly going on with this ponytail palm to cause it to have so many yellowing leaves, so I recommend gently removing the plant from its pot and taking a really good look at those roots. Brown and mushy usually means root rot, and surprisingly, this plant doesn't appear to have a serious root rot problem, and most of the roots still looked pretty good. I was really surprised. However, it may have had root rot at one time, so I'm going to remove all the soil and replace it with nice fresh soil. Now, if you notice any brown or mushy roots on your plant, just trim off those damaged roots. Typically, I don't repot new plants right away, and I prefer to give them time to acclimate to my home before repotting. However, if the plant is really struggling, like this one or other plants that we see on clearance, and it has root rot, that kind of thing, repotting is always a good idea. Next up is treating for any pests or diseases on the plant. Even if you don't see any pests, it's always a good idea to treat it just in case. So first step is to thoroughly wash the leaves of your plant. This ponytail palm is pretty huge and has a lot of really clumpy soil, so I decided to wash it off outside, plus my grass gets a good watering at the same time. I gave the leaves a thorough washing, and I also washed the soil from the roots. I could tell the roots were really dry on this plant and they would break really easily. So if the roots had been hydrated, this wouldn't have been an issue. But in order not to break the roots and cause extra trauma to the plant, I washed the soil off and the roots remained intact. It looked great. And washing the roots also helps prevent any pests that may be in the root system. As far as pest management, there are many natural remedies you can use, such as neem oil or soapy water. Alternatively, you could use an insecticide or fungicide, but just be sure to follow the instructions carefully. For this plant, I didn't see any immediate pests, so in addition to washing the leaves, I just used some insecticidal soap to take care of anything that may have been on the plant. Next up is the fun part, which is repotting the plant with gorgeous new soil. And ideally, I'd use one of my favorite slotted orchid pots so I could keep an eye on the roots and the moisture because they're clear and they're just the best. But I didn't have one large enough, unfortunately. But luckily, with all the soil washed off, the original nursery pot of the plant worked out to be the correct size. So I sanitized the nursery pot and then added some soil. And I'll be using the tropical houseplant soil from rePotme.com. It's customized for tropical houseplants, but whatever soil you use, you'll want to make sure it's well draining for most of these tropical plants. And a lot of times that's what caused the root rot at the store in the first place, was the fact the soil wasn't well draining enough. Now, as always, I'd love to mention you can make your own easy soil mixture with 50% potting mix to retain moisture and 50% some other substrate like perlite, pumice, orchid bark to help that soil be well draining. Now, I'll also be using some systemic granules on this plant as a preventative against future pests. The plant will absorb the active ingredient in the systemic granules, and if a pest feeds on the plant, the ingredient will kill the pest. As always, make sure to water your plant properly, and now that it has that beautiful well-draining soil that it has been wanting the whole time, it will be so much happier when you're watering it. Go ahead and give that plant some water, allow it to settle into its new pot, and the next time it's halfway to fully dry, you can give that plant another good watering. Now, if you have your plant in a cover pot or in some kind of saucer, just make sure to empty that saucer out so that that plant isn't just sitting in water. Now, don't forget to give your plant enough light. It will be so happy if you give it a good amount of light. It will really help it recover. And usually bright indirect light is a good rule of thumb for most of these tropical plants. And lastly, I would hold off on fertilizing for a few weeks just until it kind of gets settled into the pot. If it's starting to look better, you can go ahead and fertilize it. I'd start at half strength using a houseplant fertilizer. As it comes into the growing season and it's starting to put out new growth, at that point you can go to full strength if it's responding well to the fertilizer. For the next few weeks, make sure to quarantine your plant from the rest of your plant collection to ensure if there are any pests, they will not spread to your other plants. Remember, every plant is unique, and what works for one may not work for another, so have fun with it and experiment. Keep your eye on your plant and adjust your care routine as needed to help it thrive. I hope this video was helpful. Please make sure to leave your comments below, sharing any helpful tips that you found when you're caring for your clearance or plants on sale, or any great plants that you found on sale. I have a lot of other houseplant care episodes if that's something you're interested in watching. And if you'd like to see future videos show up in your newsfeed, make sure to subscribe. And we also have a wonderful community on Instagram. And lastly, huge thank you again to rePotme for sponsoring my Houseplant Care 101 series. I love all of their houseplant products, so definitely check them out, and you can use code Ashley for 10% off any of their wonderful houseplant soils. So if you are on the hunt for a great clearance plant, best of luck. There are definitely some good deals out there. Now, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day. You'll definitely be seeing me soon. Bye!